us, the guilds, what you think we can or should eliminate next from the guidelines to cut your costs. What would actually help us, help you guys without interfering and interrupting the overall ecosystem too much?
Penalties.
That's not how it works. That would be the opposite.
That's right.
OIG updates.
Yeah, that's actually happening.
Well, I was about to say, that's already kind of...
Starting with next month, we're going down to monthly updates, and you don't really have to submit much anymore as we're dialing those down. So, less OIG updates.
I cannot really imagine any other APIs and stuff. I don't know. I would probably rather want to know when we start on the paid atomics and stuff so we can focus on either keeping that or shutting that down as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's still in the works. We're not there yet. I don't expect paid atomics and paid Hyperions within the next 2.5 months. So I think the earliest we will see that is probably starting July. That is
kind of bad because we're already getting pay cuts of, I don't know how many percent till July.
So right now for April, the pay cut is only 4%, but not on the full amount, but only on the parachute. The pay cut on May will be 20%, and then June is 36%. And then July, hopefully, we figured out most of the contract stuff and who is going to be paid how. But that's why we want to eliminate stuff now and to change the system so that people can start to shut stuff down. So my first contender for elimination, even though that's probably not that much money, is testnet history. I don't think we need everybody to provide testnet history, and it's at least one server that could go down.
That would be good.
See? There is an API to eliminate. Yes, please, Noel.
I was gonna say, is it worth is it worth asking the guilds who would be interested in running each of the services, or is everyone just gonna put their hands up? Is that redundant? I don't know.
Well, yeah, the bid process, I'm curious about. I mean, I know you don't have it, but yeah, any type of framework, any sort of, and I'm more on the Hyperion. I mean, the atomics to me are much easier. I mean, 1-2 terabyte. I got a couple of them anyway, but I mean, a big nasty history. I mean, is it worth it for me to throw 50, 60 terabytes at it? It's not the same as you guys with a little drop down that you pay for, you know?
It's kind of redundant to ask many. So we already know mostly who wants to do it. Many reached out. And then we know who we would want to do it. So I don't think asking makes much sense. But of course, we can ask, and if people have something to say about that, people can what's good is if people tell us who don't want to do it. So we know if somebody would want to do it.
Is it going to be $5,000 a month? There's going to be a lot of people that want to do it. Does that make sense? I mean,
sure.
That's why, and I get it. I mean, I think the first answer is probably a 3-month out time frame. That's at least okay. Let's tentatively go on that. I'm not holding you to it, but things are going to go status quo as needed until potentially 3 months out, when that may be when a full shift over to full history might be.
Yeah. The question for you, for example, is: do you want to stick to partial history, or would you go up to also providing full history? Because you're one of the candidates that is definitely a good candidate to run Hyperion. But you currently only run partial, and there's the question if you would want to run full history or not.
Right, because it's the contiguous space thing for me to be honest with you, but it's just a pain in the ass to do anything more than 20 terabytes. But I mean, we can do it. But I mean, if it's going to be a battle to the bottom, for I don't know.
No, exactly.
$400 a month.
No, that's something we don't want. And what so far we had consensus on with the Wax team that we will not pick based on who is making the cheapest offer, but more based on who do we know provides quality and what quality do we get for what price.
Okie dokie.
But yeah, in the end, the wax team has the say, and we don't fully know how they're going to decide. But I think so far the conversations I had with Lucas, or we had with Lucas, was we go by quality. We have a couple guilds in mind that we envision could run it, and then we'll see who of them wants to do it. Yeah, that's about it.
To add another candidate, on Thursday we also mentioned IPFS from the Quality of Life APIs section, right?
Yeah. Also something we could potentially eliminate. Doesn't affect that. I think it affects fewer guilds than full history on testnet, but it definitely does affect some.
We talked about the testnet history on Thursday, even though it wasn't a tech call, but it was only a few of us here. And we pretty much came to testnet is for testing things. Long history isn't really needed for anything except for testing functionality that you just will swap for mainnet later. I mean, exactly. You only need data for a few days or weeks, mostly.
Yeah. Yeah, the only reason we had marked it as full currently was that it's not that much data in testnet, so the difference between it being full or partial wasn't that big. That's why it was just full. That should probably go away.
Do you think it will work with a single testnet history node?
I think it should be more. I think the conversation we had with Lucas on that was that whoever has the contracts for testnet for Hyperion or Atomic would also provide it on testnet. I think that was the general idea, because it makes the most sense. Don't separate it across multiple teams.
Yeah, if you run the full mainnet, it's not a big add-on to add full testnet.
Yeah. I mean, it's more than you would. It's by far the busiest testnet we have, but it's nothing like mainnet. And yeah, you should be able to squeeze it in. Or
yeah, it's less disk space. You don't need as much traffic and everything.
It can survive on a potato, I can tell you. I mean, you can actually limp along.
The other thing we were... Sorry, yeah, go on, Janice.
I think you're going to mention the backups.
Yeah, I was exactly in this moment going to mention the backups.
Go ahead then.
So the other thing we were discussing is removing the backups from the criteria as they are right now. So we have too many backups. We reduced the score, but we think it's still something that creates pressure on the guilds, incurs cost, and does not really benefit the ecosystem so much. So we would go back to just having like 2 providers for backups and keep it at that until we have the contracts in place to cover that.
I just got a new blocks backup 2 days ago.
Yeah. What's your thought on this, reducing the number of backups, guys?
I don't think it will impact most teams, because most teams run their backups for their own sake. It might reduce something publicly. I don't know.
That's why, like, I was laughing, is that right before the requirement to build a new public full Hyperion node, Ross takes down his public backups, and all of a sudden, shit just got real, huh?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think the 2 OG backup providers are Ross and Weekend, so Pavel. And I assume they will keep providing them as long as they get points, because they get points separately from just providing them based on the criteria. So I would assume we keep those 2, and then whoever keeps providing them anyway.
Yeah, after hearing Ross, I don't think he's just going to provide them just anyway. He will keep running them if need be, but that's a substantial. Not like the
but but he is getting points for it.
Right, I get it.
Yeah, so he keeps getting points for it, and ultimately, if he gets the contract, he would be paid for it separately. So it's just for us, the consideration is now, do we take away snapshots and backups entirely from the criteria, aside of Ross and Weekend, or do we just keep decreasing the points for now? So
I think that you're going to find that there are going to be providers that provide backups regardless.
It was the case. I mean, it was the case before we had the criteria,
right?
And we just wanted to have more, so we introduced the criteria. Now we have too many, and we think this is incurring more cost than need be for the ecosystem.
Yes, I concur. I don't think that. I think that will not be a void.
Yeah, and we will also reduce the score threshold. So we will, with the next evaluation, we will reduce the minimum score so that we don't have more guilds drop out just based on the score.
Makes sense.
I have another proposal I wanted to discuss with the Wax team I didn't get, is that we separate the scores further. So right now we have the threshold, and you're either in or you're out. And if you're in, you get the pay, you get the parachute and everything. And if you're out, you get nothing. So right now, with the system as is and all the dial down, it does not make sense to build big products. And what we've seen is that guilds resign that are focused on ecosystem, on infrastructure, and it makes sense. Doesn't make sense for them to invest effort into something short term just to keep on a paid standby position. So my proposal here is that we have another tier. So everybody that is shortly below standby and is passing all other minimum requirements would keep getting the base pay. So the standard standby rewards, the standard top 21 rewards. Yeah, probably not top 21 because you're not. But the standard standby rewards, just not the parachute. And that way we could keep, for example, guilds that just want to start already focus on only infrastructure. And this makes for a smoother transition later this year when everybody essentially only getting infrastructure scores.
Any opinions on this?
I'm just along for the ride.
Okay. No opinions.
Yep.
Noted.
Well, opinions on here don't matter. They need to be submitted as GitHub issues, is what I understand.
Not in this case. Not everything has to be submitted as GitHub issue.
That's not at all what I've been whacked across my head and told.
If you have to submit in GitHub issue, it's usually too late for an opinion. Because that means the change has already happened. And this is what we have far too often, that we keep discussing something we want to change for months. And then nobody has an opinion or the opinion agree. And then after we do the change that we have been discussing for months, people are surprised and start complaining.
I mean, you understand that's life, right?
Yeah, I know that's life.
I think of everything.
That's just how it is.
As I was just seeing aside, it doesn't matter how big you make the sign, people won't read it.
Yeah. Okay.
Nah, I mean, you got to do something. So yes, let's see where.
In the end, almost everything is going away. So it's more the question of in what order do we do it? What helps everybody right now? And how do we keep people engaged and happy throughout the process?
I think that the bidding process through labs and getting people onboarded on that ideally needs to happen before points go away for everything, because it's it's a weird limbo if you start shutting services down, and then all of a sudden you get a contract to run that service. You're like, oh, okay, I got to spin it all up again. So
yeah, of course.
rather than doing that, you're still going to be running something, even if the points aren't there for it, just in case you get picked, you know? So I think that ideally we need to get this all squared away on the bidding process.
So some discussions we had was trying to align what we have with the contract. For example, now we take away testnet history. And then later on, as we progress, for example, July, we say whoever wants to get points for running Hyperion on mainnet also has to provide it on testnet. Because this is essentially how it would be when the contracts are in place. So we align what we have and grant points for with what the system will be sometime in October. But as long as we take money away, we also need to take pressure away, even if there's no system in place yet, because we can't expect people to provide it for free or actually burn money on it without getting really anything in return.
We can shut down Hyperion already, right?
Full Hyperion, yes. Technically, you're getting points for partial Hyperion. If you say you don't need the points, you can shut it down, of course. So this makes sense if you say down the line you don't want to apply for running it as a contract.
You can run a contract for the partial or also only the full?
Both. There will be contracts for partial history and for full history. And at least the last discussion we had was that we will have only 1 or 2 full history providers. In my opinion, it should be 2, and that we will then have another 3 probably partial providers. I assume that most of the full providers will also be partial providers, but I think that we will have at least 1 or 2 extras that are not also full history providers. What's your thought?
I don't know. I mean, if there's that few, do you really even slice them up like that? I mean, because then you're going to have to know, well, these are the full ones, these are the partial ones. I don't care. I mean, they're just going to say, give me history. You know? I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
the problem.
My first thought was.
The thing we have with that is that that full Hyperion nodes are just way harder to, way more expensive to maintain.
Right.
So 90%, 95% of the load we have needs partial, and it does not make sense to have full Hyperion nodes provide responses that could be coming from a partial history. So it does make sense to split the ones in 2. And there comes the thing into play. What I wanted to have is that we have specific endpoints, and that all full Hyperions are bundled in one endpoint and load balanced, and all partial are bundled in another endpoint and load balanced across all providers. So that's clear. You can either query full history or you query partial history. But then furthermore, I would prefer, I think at least at this point, I did not have, and I did not think it's, anyway, what I want to say is, I think it might make sense if full history node only index final blocks, so that full history is always 3 minutes behind. I think it's 3 minutes, right?
So, you mean web node? Yeah, I mean 2 to 3 minutes, whatever.
Yeah. Because this would mean that anybody who needs only recent data could not abuse these nodes for this.
Yeah, that's smart. I was about to say everyone will use full Hyperion in the end, but if it doesn't serve their requests...
No. The explorers are going to shit a brick if you're behind 3 minutes. I can tell you, if I'm behind 5 seconds, people start going nuts. I mean, I hear you.
Yeah. I agree, and that's what I mean. This means in these rare cases, and these are really rare cases, where somebody needs both, he just needs to query both. He queries full history node for old data, and then the partial history just for the last 3 minutes, and then pieces the two together. That would be my train of thought here, because
that makes my head hurt to think that would be coding. I'm curious, since Null's building something like that, that just seems stupidly complex.
Use case, but you can imagine it did not imagine Xblock.
We can't hear, I can't hear you, Ben.
Yeah, you're Mr. Robot.
Wait.
Auto-tune.
Yeah, same as before. But I don't think that this is a good idea for a lot of user interfaces where you want to show both new and old actions.
yeah, that's the question. So I don't think there is that many interfaces that do this, that need this. I think most interfaces only either need recent transactions or they need old transactions. And partial history would still provide like the last 2-3 months, like the last 1 or 2 or 3 months or so. So for most cases, you only need partial history. And it's very rare cases where you need to older data. That's my idea.
Yeah, so you're not focusing on the 3 minutes, you're focusing on, hey, do you need more than 12 weeks? Go full.
Exactly. I'm not focusing on this. I'm not focusing on the 3 minutes. I'm focusing on, do you need more than 6 weeks, or do you just need everything that's old? And what plays into this is something I don't know, so you have to help me out, Michael. What I know about Atomic is that one of the biggest things that takes most of the processing power, or a lot of the processing power, is the fork handling. So storing all the data to handle potential forks. At least that was what I was told. And if you don't have to account for forks on Atomic, you can run way cheaper hardware.
Atomic's probably better about it. I mean, only because they kind of march their own path. They
I heard the other way.
Yes, forks are impactful. It's not good to have to roll back, but I personally see it way more on the Hyperion, just because of the scale of, it's literally undoing mining transactions. It's literally doing all the extra stuff too, right?
Yeah.
It is true that, I mean, a fork causes it to spike. The bottleneck of Atomic, in my opinion, tends to be Postgres single thread. You know, I mean, it ramps up and says, I got to get from A to B, but I can only get there as fast as your processor can go. But I don't notice Atomic, or haven't in a long time, lagging because of forks. We don't really have a lot of double producing or micro forks like it used to be. But the same argument is, I mean, if it does, it does. It lags a little bit. It says, oh, shit, all right, let's try to grind through it. It's going to spike it and just hammer on it until it can catch up. But I, in my opinion, what's way more impactful to it that I've found is how it's used. You can pass parameters that can just string out the join statements.
Yeah.
That has been far more, and it's the same thing. Postgres had, even though it's multi-threaded or hyper-threaded, whatever, one query can only execute on one thread. You can start another one on another thread, but once you start a process, you have to finish that process. And even on our i9s, I mean, it hits 5.7 gigahertz, but it rips on it and then it finishes. So in my opinion, Atomic is much lighter and easier in the scale of, you know, what all we run.
Yeah, it was just an example. I'm not talking of Atomic. I was just considering if this is also an issue for Hyperion, that would be better if the Hyperion node would not have to account for that, because there never is a fork, because the transactions are all final when they're indexed.
It is. I would probably say this is, I mean, it does affect Hyperion, but to go 3 minutes in arrear, nah, brah. I mean, if you're that far behind, we've tuned people to assume, you know, I mean, it may not be there within half a second, but if it took 2 minutes to display, I feel like that would dramatically change.
Yeah, but it's not supposed. No, but it's not supposed to. If you need something that is newer than 2 minutes, you should not use full Hyperion. Period.
Well, we'll table that. Talking about atomic, I mean, you really get full atomic or not. So
yeah, of course.
I'm going to say
absolutely
not on atomic because that's pretty easy. Like I say, your points are valid.
Can you hear me guys now?
Yes. Hey, there you go.
Yeah, perfect.
You want to jump in?
What about when you need a list of transactions and you need the last couple that was done just recently, but you also need the transactions that are, I don't know, months or 2 months old, and you just need one query to display them all? You would probably run to, like, one example is like the first page of a contract on Waxblock always shows you the last transaction that are just very new. You can see that you, for example, if you do a transaction, you want to check that out.
Yeah.
You can see, oh, I did this transaction. It's new. It's still pending. It's not final. But you also want to see the last couple of transactions that might be a bit older.
Yeah,
so there are a lot of, and is it that much of a hassle to activate recent transactions on a full Hyperion?
No, it's not about that. It's not about activating recent transactions on a full Hyperion. The idea is to educate people. It's mostly about educating people and prevent abuse. Because if we only have 2 full Hyperion endpoints and people keep using them like they use them right now, this is an issue, because then these are flooded because people will just keep using the full Hyperions because just in case. And this is why I would prefer to educate them. And also, if we have a limited number of partial Hyperions, and these partial Hyperions are paid out a separate contract, I would also assume that they provide more than 6 weeks. I would rather opt in for like 3 months or 6 months, just not as big as full Hyperion. I think that makes the most sense. And then most of the cases, you would have enough data on the partial, and then you can still do action counts and everything to see if there's anything older. So there's...
I think I understand where you're going with it. I still probably am not.
Yeah, I just don't think it works like that in reality. Especially when you're... Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, especially when you're paging through transactions using like the global index or something. I've seen that global index be different between different Hyperions.
This is that's the thing. We would have to standardize that for some way. We would have to standardize it anyway if we want to load balance all transactions across multiple Hyperions anyway.
Correct.
And that what was discussed. If we want to load balance and then people are paging, this has to be standardized. It has to be the same indexes across all providers.
Yeah, I think that global index thing might have been a bug at some point though, because I know that global index comes from Nodios, so.
Okay.
Well,
I don't know how they got out of sync.
It's welcome to layer 2 Hyperions, right? I mean, just running different versions sometimes can get you different results. But I agree. I mean, I get where you're trying to go with it. Is if it's lagged by 2 to 3 minutes, you're going to force people to not use get transaction status to just check the last transaction, which was a lot of the abuse.
Yeah,
I went and looked, and I reset stats 20 hours ago, but I've had about 100,000 hits on our Hyperion wax partial. I mean, it's partial, but it's not millions a minute. And I know there's several other providers that are out there, but when you were talking about having like 2 full histories and I don't know, maybe 3 partials, and then having to figure out which ones and whatever, I more just kind of went, I mean, if you're paying some people to run Hyperion, I would almost say run Hyperion full, you handle your partial, you handle your full, you deal with the load however you deal with it. Well, versus trying to put any of that burden on people to learn, people to have to understand. You know, I mean,
if we load balance two different types of Hyperion anyway, then it's probably a good idea to just have a clear naming convention to tell people what to use, like fullhistory.wax.io, or
there's your first piece of information that you got to know and you got to understand versus history.wax.io or something, right? I mean, you're right, 100% agree. But I go back to...
I probably wouldn't call it partial, but maybe recent transaction, I don't know, something easy.
I would venture to say the same people that are probably going to provide full are going to want to, I mean, there's no reason not to provide partial for obvious reasons. I don't know how much of a financial benefit, you know, I mean, if there's only 2 or 3 and it can be run on smaller hardware, I mean, that's the whole point of running partial. You can run it on a 1 or 2 terabyte NVMe with a decent, you know, VM. Well, okay. I mean, are you only going to pay $200 a month for it? You know, I mean, I questioned when you said it. I was like, man.
Isn't it better to control this with rate limit though? ASP, hey, partial have this rate limit, full history has this rate limit, since it will be under one thing. And if they need more, they will use the partial one, or they can use the full. It's up to them. Pretty much what Michael was onto now.
That's a good point.
Just push them towards partial by giving them more API calls.
Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily spam full history, right? If you just go through the transactions, it takes time anyway. So
I would say this. I mean, if we're going through the effort of kind of putting up an intentional hardship to say, you're not going to have current data over here, we're trying to intentionally kind of steer you in this direction or the other. The right answer is to tell them to use get transaction status or whatever comes from the RPC API, the right way of doing it. I mean, we're complicating history to try to kind of prevent abuse. And I'll be honest with you, this ain't abuse that we're seeing right now. It's a lull. So there's not a lot of activity, but it ain't a lot. You know, I mean, it's not a million a minute. But I just question is, why wouldn't you just say history is history? It could be rate limited. It can be done whatever. But if you need to pound the shit out of history, you don't need to use history. You need to use the API that was built for that, right?
Yeah.
There should be different rate limits in place for full or partial histories.
My argument is that I question whether there should be 2 types to begin with. But yes, if you're adamant that there needs to be 2 and you want to maintain 2 and train them on 2, that's fine. The whole reason you're doing 2 is really to try to stop them from doing what they shouldn't even be doing to begin with. And having to train them this new process.
That's a good point. Do we actually need 2 types if we just have to run, all the people that run the full history have to add 1 more server to run partial just to take a bit of the load?
Let's say the whole, yeah, it's not the load or I mean, that's what I say. I think from a technical level, we're all going to do it anyway. He's trying to do it to keep people from smashing the full history servers with this get transaction status that doesn't need history to begin with, right? I mean, that's kind of the fundamental, that's what the partial history is good for. It's lighter, it's faster, you can smash it. But that's kind of where this, well, you've got light and, you know, partial and full. Well, shit, if you're going to have to go through and know, well, this is full and this is partial and this is how you merge them together and this is going to be behind and this is going to be current and this is rate limited and this one isn't.
I think
they
that's
should
a
see
good
on that
point.
article, here's history and you get 20 a minute, period. It's full history, it's current, you get 20 a minute, whatever our rate limit is. But if you need to check the transaction status, number 1, use the endpoint to retry, because then you don't even have to check it. Number 2, use the RPC get transaction, and then you don't, there's no reason that they, if they're going to have to learn that the system doesn't work like they wanted it to begin with, just teach them to fish. Does that make sense?
I think it's good.
Question.
Set the rate limit on full, skip partial, and then educate people. Hey, use this API for transactions, or pay for more rate limits.
Right. I mean, private infrastructure, other options. I'll whitelist them if need be. But I go back to the UX experience of no, don't make two different types, because now you're having to funnel them in, train them, and get them out. Well, if you're funneling them in, teach them to do it right. Then you've just got history servers that do their thing. If
someone was paying us for it, we could just spin up a different handle for get transaction. I mean, it's
right. That's what I'm like. And the load we're seeing right now, I mean, it's 100,000 a day, maybe. And I mean, I considered it, and I would assume Sweden, Ross, Rio. It ain't about the load and whatever. I mean, if it's bad, it's bad. I'll take care of it, you know. I don't think it's worth having the two separate layers, really, if the whole intent is to keep them from abusing it when there's something else better to do anyway. Anyway, that all makes sense? You concur, Doctor?
Yeah. Two different get transaction endpoints would be good to have. One like get transaction confirmed or something like that.
We have that.
I mean, we have an API for that.
Chain API. There's a built-in one.
Wasn't it Memento? That's even more efficient.
Yeah, but that's layer 2. This is literally a core Node OS endpoint. That there's two that kind of work in tandem. One is the retry to say, hey, when you submit it, I'll keep retrying it just in case. And then the second is get transaction. And none of those require anything layer 2. It literally is just an RPC net.
In that case, what Node says makes sense. If we just increase the rate limit on get transaction, then people would be discouraged from spamming that and try to find like the
I'm pretty sure we have that set. We have different setup for that and different for action.
Right. I mean, and that's what I was saying. I mean, when you start getting into the providers, I mean, they have a dedicated server for get transaction. You can have different rate limits for it. I mean, but I'll be honest, we don't do anything based off of get transaction or what they're querying. And the load right now isn't really anything crazy. So
is anyone applying different rate limits on the same server but different routes? Like, for example, rate limit X on get transaction?
Yes, always.
Yes.
You do?
We tended to, because remember, I've got all my chain APIs and history APIs and IBC and all that other stuff all kind of tucked together. But you can easily start overpowering Hyperion by smashing the shit out of it with normal node transactions that it's trying to route to a back end something. So we intentionally route chain traffic here and we'll rate limit you trying to sneak in to a history. But yes, we have rate limits on our API. We have rate limits on our Hyperion, and we have rate limits on Atomic. I have backed them off because it's not as bad as it used to be. But those were the three knobs that we tended. I didn't do get transaction or get blocks or any of that. I just kept throwing servers at it, you know. Sweden's way more sophisticated.
We have different on get transactions, get action, and then history, and then also get info. Get info is basically no limit at all.
Makes sense.
Right.
Unless you hit one of our, we have a daily limit for an IP. If you start to spam the shit out of us, you will be blocked from everything.
Yeah, that's how fail to ban works, for example, too, right?
Yeah, you can set up fail to ban with whatever rules you want.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we have fail to ban. We use that behind issue proxy to check it.
Okay, so
that was my feeble opinion. I'm down for whatever you want to do, but
I think your opinion is correct. Partial doesn't make sense after these changes.
Right. I mean, not what it's going to cost in UX and training and pain and suffering and management and all of that. nah, brah.
It made sense when there was supposed to be a lot of them. If you go down to a few teams that are paid for it, it doesn't make the same logic. It's not the same logic anymore.
Well, and it was to apply the base to say, look, you just keep querying and you get what you're hopefully getting. But I mean, I appreciate Caper's, suggestion is if you lag that data for 3 minutes, they'll stop that pretty quick. That's true. But I don't know whether that's gonna outweigh the pain of any other logistics.
Anyways, I want to thank you for all the information and opinion shared. They help find a good decision here.
That's just my opinion. You should ask other people too.
No, I agree. So it has to be the truth.
Yes. So trust me, bro.
Of course, if it's, I don't know, Sweden, USA, Sphere.
Sometimes we don't agree on things, but when we agree, it has to be the truth, right?
Hyperion, that's what I say. If the three of us are being together and being like, look, that's what it is, I'd question anybody questioning it. I'm sure Ross has an article about it somewhere.
I don't know. I still think there are instances that it makes sense to have partial because of what you can do and want to do with a blockchain. And if you go into gaming only needs usually the last hour maybe of transactions. And if we have many games on Wax again,
most games use GetTable, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure.
So that's a different thing. That doesn't hit Hyperion at all.
And I mean, yeah, it's like
that's
if you want the history and you're going to,
get transactions is not Hyperion, GetTable is not Hyperion. A lot of these things are not.
Yeah, true.
Pushing transactions is a different thing also.
If your game has to smash the shit out of the history servers to process, that's more where it's like the only thing that typically requires that is checking status, right? That's valid. Well, there's a better way of doing that.
Getting back information from the RNG. If you have your game use the on-chain RNG, you need to get back the data from the RNG, so you have to wait until the data is on-chain.
And I don't know if this is 100% applicable because again, above my pay grade, but I know that we've had some recent conversations about these read-only transactions that, how do you feed data back in? And again, it's part of that training of if that's what you're doing, you're right, it might work, but you're going to get rate limited, right? I mean, you start rate limiting the hell out of people learn the problem pretty quick. They just need an easy solution to it, right? Well, if you're checking transaction status, use this endpoint. And if you need to just fetch data from what happened, fire another action that returns whatever you need, as opposed to query in Hyperion to rip through a 50 terabyte database.
Also, most games can just adapt to rate limits, and if they are very big, they should have they will get some special treatment anyway, right?
Stupid question maybe, but can't I request a random number and get the result returned in the same action?
No, you can't. You push a transaction into a smart contract, then the Oracle reads from the smart contract and writes the RNG back to your contract. And then you have to query your own contract to get whatever the impact was. But it's a GetTable rule usually. So it's not a history call. Yeah, it's correct. Not a history.
One problem what Anders mentioned, if the game is not necessarily making the request, it's kind of the user doing the request, so it's coming from the user client. So isn't
that less of a problem?
Well, if the game is programmed in a way, you would have many different users, many different IPs spamming get transactions, which is
but they have their
the
own rate limit, each of them.
Yeah, but that means if the game is badly programmed, you will have a lot of requests from many different IPs.
And it'll hit a rate limit, their game will start failing, and they'll start fixing their problem. That's what, I mean, you're right, but that's what's going to force them to stop spamming the history servers, is you can use it as long as you use it within reason, and once you start going across whatever threshold we start to set.
If 100 of them,
I mean, if the game does not make, if a single player on the game does not make too many requests to the Hyperion, but the game scales horizontally, they build like million players, a player base of 1 million or whatever, then all of those millions will also not get rate limited because
yes, that's
it's from
okay.
their IP.
That's not a
Well,
problem.
it's bad for the Hyperions.
On a scale of 1 million, it's a problem. On a scale of 10,000, 20,000, it's not a problem. You just cache the data and you don't even touch the nodes behind it.
And
that's a problem for the future. I mean, no one is close to that.
Oh, you're right. If you are like running a request with the same transaction ID, then no, it's not. I guess it's not. Can you do that? Because then you
do what?
Can you do that? You cannot cache the request for a single transaction because then it will always say it's not confirmed yet.
Why?
Because it will always
you cache it with a time limit, so it refreshes after X time. If you have 1,000 requests within half a second, then everyone will get from the cache, or 1 second, or 5 seconds, or whatever rule you have on the caching.
Okay, if you use cache that short, yeah.
We have different, like get info. We don't have the same length as on a get transaction. Get transaction doesn't change much. Get info changed every block.
What do you use? Redis?
No, Varnish. But you can have a lot of different caching solutions. Up to every team how you do it.
As an infrastructure provider, I guess the way I kind of look at what you're saying, Ben, I mean, horizontally, if you're not abusing it, that each client is just smashing it abusively. I mean, if you're just doing normal transactions and there's just that many clients, as an infrastructure provider, it's on us. We've got the threshold that if you cross it, you're abusing it. If you're below it, you're not abusing it. It's on us to provide that level of service. And if it takes more servers, or it takes intelligent routing, or it takes caching, that's what it takes. And the bid process is probably going to reflect it, is that, Wax just blew up again. We've got 1 million requests a minute again.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And also, if it's like a bot farm playing the game, then it will probably be the IP of the bot farm.
And they should get rate limited.
And I can tell you as a provider, when you start seeing people that stand out, you can whack them with a mallet, but I tend to, we come to an agreement that says, look, any client should be able to use 20 every 20 seconds or something, right? Something like that. And if it's above it, they get whacked in the head. And if it's below it and it's just horizontally scaled, if we're failing, we need to buy some more servers and then get some more money from Wax, I guess. But we'll be a victim of our own success. Anyway.
Just one stupid thought. I'm not sure if that's possible to set up, but if you have a get transaction request and you set up full history to have only confirmed blocks and partial history to have all the blocks, if you get a get transaction request and have the rate, not a rate limit, a load balancer, is it possible to send it to the full history and partial history simultaneously, and then based on
it's
which
complicated.
Valid
anything is possible. I have seen some crazy shit. Aaron has done some shit, and Sweden.
I was just thinking, if you send that request and it does not return anything from the full, you can route it to the partial and then cache that based on.
Should be the other way.
Could you do that? Yes, I can tell you as a Hyperion provider, I wouldn't go through all of that. I mean, I'd literally just, set it up to be able to handle it or route things accordingly. But and that's why I struggle trying to think. I mean, you're going to literally have to start reading the post requests and start routing or getting responses and routing based off of responses. That's how Greymass's thing did, is they had custom responses. And then a man in the middle that was kind of stepping it through all the different servers to find which server has that data. But either
I
A,
guess
from
it's
the
just theoretical and doesn't really answer.
Yeah,
how
we looked at the
treat
different
waste.
thing by looking at if you have a get action and then it goes to the partial, but if the data is not there, it goes to the other one. But that quickly becomes very difficult for the middleman to know where that data exists and how much of that data exists.
right.
There's no simple way to do that, because you need to know, okay, you get a response of 300 actions from the partial. Do you need more? Are there more? Or is what you are requesting
Only on the get
even there at
transaction
all?
request.
Well, on get transaction, I mean, just in that example, you'd either have to real time have like a rediz of which transactions are where to route real time, or you'd have to do it reaction, route it here, and if responded failed, then route here. And it's absolutely doable. Nginx can do it. I've seen it done. I just go, for the love of God.
There's a lot of complexity.
This doesn't really. It's just
Because otherwise you do 2 requests and then what's the point?
And if we're at that level, your Hyperion providers should react and be like, hey, yo, we're taking 1 million requests a minute now, something, whatever. We can put the infrastructure in place to handle it, but then our bid's going to have to go up, right? I mean, and that's down the road anyway. So
But
yes,
okay, let's see that we start to see a spike and we see more get transactions. It just goes up. Then we will start to look at how to optimize that and handle it. It's not a problem until it's a problem.
Right. That's why I say your major providers are probably going to respond accordingly. And in your bid process, I'm not going to do it anymore for $500. I'm going to do it for $600. Good luck finding anybody else to do 1 million requests a minute for 600 or 800 or whatever, right? Whatever it is.
Okay, my fellow guilds and developers and DevOps engineers, and wherever you see yourself, it's time to conclude again for today. But it's sure what we are going to talk about next week then again. Maybe we can come up with a plan until then with what is going to be striked first and what's going to remain until last. Whenever there will be news, we will inform you in time. And then
I was going to say, Null put something in the chat that he would love to see some of the stats on some of that coming in. Happy to show you or feed some to you, but it's all over the place. But yeah, I can show you some stats.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Michael. It's time. Have a good Tuesday and talk to you in the week or Thursday for the community chat.
Thank you.
All right.
See ya.
Peace.
See ya.